Well, Valen, welcome on. It's good to be chatting with you. As I feel like I've hyped it up loads, and I've said that this is going to be the easiest street podcast in my life because, I've only ever spoken to you face to face once before, and it was just very, very easy. You
that was the podcast thing at TwitchCon EU, wasn't it?
It was
like a little podcast get together.
It was, and what I saw from that brief interaction was born entertainer, knows how to handle a room.
This is the thing. Is very much so. So I've obviously got a history in doing like cabaret and performing and stuff, and thinking on my feet is very much the thing that I do. That's what people have paid me for decades now. To literally think on my feet and just be like, right, okay, you're in a situation now. But as a result, it means that I get into situations like that, and I'm just like, okay, nobody's talking, so I'm gonna do it. Like, nobody's taking charge or directing this stuff. I'm gonna be like, right, let's add some vague structure to this entire concept.
It was good. It was just cut short by a drag show.
Oh no, those drag queens. So the audacity, I tell you, the audacity.
So. Before we get to kind of like what you do on Twitch now, and I'm very interested into how sex education on Twitch works in general. For example, I couldn't put the word sex in my going live notification today.
Oh, yeah.
It's in the stream title, but I can't put it in the going live notification.
No.
Which led to a very intriguing go live notification, which said Twitch won't allow me to say what Valen does. So come along and find out for yourself.
Perfect.
But where did this journey start for you?
To be fair, this journey. So it's kind of like two parallel journeys that have kind of mixed together in Twitch. So I started as a performer. Like I said, I've been doing cabaret for I don't even know how many years now. Like doing pole dance and aerial hoop and burlesque and every that side of things. That journey continued. But I've always been fascinated by sex. Always, absolutely. Since I discovered it was even a concept, I was like, I need to know everything about this. It's something that because it was like a taboo subject. My parents were very, very open about stuff. So they were very much like, okay, if you want to know anything, ask. Now, being a young teenage boy, that was not a thing. I didn't ask my parents. You don't talk to your parents about such things. That's grotesque. What a preposterous concept. But I did like dig under their bed to try and find all of like the Kama Sutra books and stuff like that. Just be like, I need to know about this stuff, but I can't ask them because that's weird.
Yeah.
So that there was like that journey where the fascination just built and built and built. And the more I found out, the more I needed to know. And then the performance side of things, which just built and built and built. And they were like parallel journeys, and it was great. And I loved it. And on one side, the sex education side, people used to come to me for advice and talk to me about their sex lives and stuff. And it was just a friendly thing,
Mm-hmm.
And then the performance side of things, obviously, I did more and more stuff. And a friend of mine turned around and was like, oh, Val, you should go onto Twitch. And I was like, what is Twitch? I've got no idea what this is. And I went onto Twitch and I was like, I am not a gamer. What do you take me for? What is this place where people watch other people play games? What a preposterous concept. And they were like, no, just do your just chatting. Or back in the day, it was IRL. And I was like, all right, okay, no worries. We'll do that. That'll be fine. That'll be all right. So during the downtimes when I wasn't on tour or wasn't on the stage and doing bits and pieces, I would do streams. And then the pandemic hit, the good old panini, and I went a little bit stir crazy with being in the same house because I'd never spent an entire week in this house. Never mind like 2 years. It just hadn't happened. And I was like, do you know what? Instead of like trying to find anything else, I'm just going to put everything into Twitch. I'm going to put everything into streaming and content creation and stuff like that. So I did, and that was where that all kicked off. And then as I slowly but surely ran out of content, because all of my content previously was me talking about being on tour, being a performer, doing all kinds of wild and wonderful things, because I don't know whether you're aware of this, but I'm a hazard of a human being. I am well and truly, the things I look back on, I'm like, geez, I should have died like these stories. Good Lord.
So that's coming in like 20 minutes or so, but yeah.
Oh man, it's a wild one. I've had a very wild life, but yeah. And then I was like running out of content, and I was like, do you know what? Let's talk about sex. Because I run fetish nights and I run cabarets and stuff when the world was back to normal. I used to do all of that stuff. And I was like, well, let's provide that for people. Let's talk about it. A lot of my community were very, very kinky and very happy to talk about these things in an open scenario. And then it just built from there. Like, people would come in to try and find out more about stuff. People would come in like fresh, like first time chatters, and they'd be like, hey, I've got this question about me and my partner, or I'm thinking about going down these routes and dabbling in anal play, or like, I've never done sex in the shower. Have you got any advice and stuff like that? And it was just like, yeah, cool, no worries. Like, allow me to look back on my completely questionable life and draw from that. And the bigger that grew, it was like I ended up reaching out to people like Hannah Witten, who is a sex educator on YouTube, and other sex educators, and being like, hey, this is growing. It's something that I'm very passionate about. It's something that I absolutely love in and of myself. And I would like to grow this, and I would love any kind of advice you've got. That was before I got deleted off YouTube, but that's another story. That's another story.
Well, I was going to say, I'm sure that'll come up as well, because I do want to get into, I know you're intimately aware of where the borders are with terms of service.
You have to be. You have to be for certain.
I have to be with mental health, you know?
Yeah.
Because anything I say is basically toes the line of whether it is classed as medical advice or not.
For sure.
Mine, I always state that mine is lifestyle advice. It's not medical advice, and so we have to, even allow people to discuss, for example, their personal experience with medication.
Yeah, okay.
But I'm even very careful to discuss my personal experience with medication, because I don't want anybody to copy what I do, and copy what I did. I don't even want me. If I went back, I wouldn't copy what I did.
No.
But yeah. So it's important to know these things. So before we go further into the realm of sex, what started the performance side of it? Where did your curiosity come from that? Like, what got you?
Oh, I have always been a flamboyant individual. Let's be very, very clear. Like, I am like the opposite end of the spectrum to anxiety. So like, some people get really anxious and nervous about doing shows and stuff like that. I'm like the polar opposite end. I do not get nervous at all. Sometimes I get a little bit giggly, a little bit excited, but it's usually very, very small. I'm just like, yeah, let's get on stage and do the thing. So like, I've always had that element, even when I was like a really like relatively shy teenager, which is hard to believe. But like, I was always a performer. I remember like, even at one point, like my dad was helping renovate the school, my primary schools. They had like gardens, and they had asked for volunteers to come in and renovate bits and pieces. And all the kids that were there went up into the hall, and basically we made our own assault course. And I had decided, I must have been 8, 9, but I had decided that every single time I completed a round of the assault course, I was going to take an item of clothing off. I just decided that. Was it a challenge? No. Was it any kind of, was there any impetus for that to happen? No, not all. I just decided it in and of myself. I was like, cool, that's all right. And it ended up me running around in my little tighty whities, just with trainers on and tighty whities. And my dad came up and was like, what the actual fuck are you doing, child? And I was like, hi, Dad. I was just very warm. It was one of those things, and like, looking back on that now, I can see where I, like, the person that I am now, and how that all came about, and how I just didn't have that impetus to worry about people seeing parts of me, like doing the burlesque and bits and pieces. It's always just kind of been there. I think the performance side of things is always been there, but it's evolved as time's gone on.
Yeah. Like,
originally, I really wanted to do like movies and theater and stuff like that. And as I discovered cabaret, I was like, oh my, look at this raunchiness. Oh, the tease, the temptation, the flamboyance. And it's only 5 minutes. It's perfect for me. Yeah, so that's
I
all went in.
I love what you said there about the opposite side of anxiety, though, because I mean, I'm exactly the same. I love being on stage. I'm an introvert, but I'm not like, I'm an introvert when it comes like, so if it had been me left to try to sort of organize that conversation at TwitchCon, we'd have all just sat there kind of saying nothing until someone talked, and I'm hardly ever the first person to talk. In fact, I have this kind of running joke that, I find it hard to get people through the door with me, but once they're through the door with me, I either never shut up or they're glad they found me or whatever. And we have that runs like so much through my community. People are like, oh my God, how did I not find this before? And I'm like, because I'm out here doing my thing, but I'm not very good at being out there telling you that I'm out there doing my thing.
Do you know what you're like? In the I like to compare things to things I know and what have you, like just for visualization. I'm a very visual person, but that to me sounds like, whereas I am like the Broadway lights in the front of the building displaying everything you're about, deep as a puddle in summer, what you see is what you get. Here it is, you're not going to miss it because we're literally singing and dancing about it. Whereas you're like one of those prohibition bars where on the outside it's completely... I
love prohibition bars as well.
Yeah, it's completely unassuming. It looks like a warehouse or a boiler house or something. And then you get in and you get round to the back and it's like cocktails galore and dry ice and perform. Yeah, I love that. Yeah,
right. That's everybody, if any of my mods are here, I want you to go and change my nickname on the Discord to Speakeasy. That's my new nickname.
There you go.
Right.
Perfect.
There. Oh, that is actually the greatest thing analogy anyone's ever made of me. But the idea of anxiety versus so I have anxiety, but I also have that stage excitement thing, and I can't wait to get out there. I'm like an absolute, and what I found is that it might feel like it's the exact opposite. But there's only one thing that's opposite about it, because anxiety feels like your thoughts are racing, your palms are sweaty, there's vomit on your sweat already. There's your heart rate's up, your breathing's up, your body temperature's up, and you feel kind of like you can't hold a thought in your head. And then excitement feels like that too. And there's only one difference: is anxiety is something you want to run away from, and excitement is something you want to run towards. It's like, I can't wait to get out on that stage. And I probably feel almost exactly the same as someone who can't wait to get away from that stage.
Yeah, it's a weird one because I don't feel that wait to get on the stage. I'm just completely. It's a really, someone just like, oh, get on the stage. I'm like, cool, no worries. Like it's a really non-plus scenario. It's only very rarely there's certain circumstances. If it's like a massive gig that I've never done before, or there's certain people in the audience that I really like admire or what have you, that's the point where the excitement kicks in.
Right.
But other than that, it's just kind of standard. I'm just so, I don't know. I'd like to say so used to it, but I don't remember a time where I did feel like even that nervous excitement or anything. I was just there. It was just like, cool. All right. Yeah. You want me to do these things?
In chat, we've got the suggestion of chaotic zen.
Chaotic zen is, it's a good way of putting my life. Do you know, it is chaotic. And do you know what? It's a wild one. I have a passionate hatred of contentment, because I feel like every single time that I'm content, things like get comfortable and nothing moves, and I'm always a pusher forward. I'm like, keep going. What's the next thing? Let's go. Okay, we've hit this target. That's amazing. What's the next goal? Aim for the stars because we'll land in the clouds. Like, yeah, just really positive and all about that pushing forward.
Yeah, love it. So for yourself, in terms of sex, I just said that, I love the fact that your parents were like super open, but it was you that was like, yeah, no, that's not happening, because you often get the opposite, obviously, where parents are like super closed off, and that's what pushes a person into kind of going and doing their exploration on their own. Are there any things like that you look back on in your early kind of education, like self-education around sex, where you think that you wish you had a guide, or you'd had some help there, or things that you think, I wish I'd learned that sooner? Is there any kind of stories about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's always things I wish I'd learned sooner, but I'm quite self-aware in regards to, like, there's a reason why I didn't learn things sooner. Like, there's always a reason why you do the things that you do, and like I've always said that, like, people turn around and say, oh, I wish I'd done better. And I'm like, well, you couldn't have done better, because if you could have done better, you would have done better. Yeah. You do the best that you possibly can, given the information that was available to you and the state of mind and mood and emotions that you were in at the time. Yeah. So as a result, I don't have many regrets, as it were, because I'm like, at the time, that was the best decision I could have made. And therefore, I made it. Now, in hindsight, I'm like, okay, I've got an extra several years worth of experience and knowledge. So now I would have done things differently because I've got all that experience and knowledge. Yeah. But yeah, but like looking back, I don't know whether it's like things in regards to like guides and stuff. Not really, because there's a certain excitement about exploring things yourself. And there's definitely things that I've done that were really stupid. That I'm like, good Lord, because especially in the early days when I was when I was a teen and filled with hormones and excitement and pressure from a variety of different angles because of like your bullies and your friends and your bits. There's always pressure going on when you're a teenager. And trying to work out who you are and where you fit in society and all that jazz. But like, gee, I was rushed. I rushed things. There was so many things that I was like, let's do these things. Let's do this. I remember having an argument when I was in university with an ex of mine. We were together for 3 years and we had 3 arguments in those 3 years. One of the arguments was about the fact that we didn't argue enough, which blew my little mind. It was just like, we don't argue enough. I'm like, are we meant to? I'm not entirely sure where we're going here. But one of the arguments was about the fact that like I was obsessed with sex toys. I was absolutely obsessed with sex toys. Any kind of weird ass shit that I could get my hands on, I did. I spent like most of my student loan on deviant implements. Like, absolutely. But it was really interesting because it get like, especially in hindsight, at the time I didn't understand it, but in hindsight, my ex felt like I didn't want to have sex with her because I had so many toys. And the fact of the matter, in my mind, I was like, I'm just excited to cause you pleasure. Like, this is just like any way that I can make you look back on these scenarios and just smile, because you can't help but smile because you were just like, my God, this wild child and his bizarre and interesting implements. Like that was where my mind was at. But they were like, do you not want to touch me? Is that the reason why you've brought all of these like toys to a thing? Because you don't want to do it yourself? Yeah. And in hindsight, that's really, really interesting. It's really like the state of mind that you've got to be in to feel that the person that you love intimately doesn't want to do these things. Whereas I was the opposite side of mind. I was like, I want to do these things so much. I have an entire treasure trove of stuff, you know?
Oh, love it.
So yeah, it's interesting. I think patience. If I could go back and speak to younger Val, I'd be like, just take a moment. Just take a moment. And
that's what I've got written on that board over there, is you need more patience in giant
letters.
More
patience. Just take a moment. It's sometimes it's not about patience. Sometimes it's about like I think that a lot of things are down to perspective and how you view things. You can look at something and see the worst, or you can look at something and see the best. And a lot of the time it's not like the viewing patience is not about going, okay, you need to slow down. Sometimes it's about just taking a step back and looking at things from different angles and going, okay, just take a moment. What else? What other things could this be? Okay, now you've looked at it, go right ahead, do your thing, do you know? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I often find with myself, I edited a video this morning that said something along the lines of, there's no such thing as too late to start, because especially when it comes to your mental health, because and almost word for word what you said a bit ago about if you'd have done better, if you could have been able to do better at the time, you'd have done better. And I think for me, like I was diagnosed with bipolar at 14, and then at 28-ish, I finally started to properly do something about it, like to learn what that really meant, rather than just the 14 years I'd had of thinking it means you're going to be either here or here. You know, it's like so. Yeah. And I get quite excited when. It sounds weird but I get quite excited when there's people that are younger than I was when I started that come into chat and they're struggling, because in my opinion, it's like that's the opportunity now to help someone. Like, I'm not going to say I never fixed my bipolar. I've still got it. No. You know, I'm not healed or cured or anything, but I have ways of living now which are so much
better for me. And I get excited by the opportunity to like introduce to like a 19-year-old person, like, so that's why I often think those not regrets, like they're because you can't go back and change you, but it's that stuff that what would I want somebody else to have to learn? Like, I've got an opportunity now, you've got an opportunity, like in the education that you're doing, to help a person feel validated 10 years younger, or to feel like 100%. What they do is normal or acceptable or permissible, you know, or whatever it might be. So speaking of younger, where sex ed obviously starts for most people is the school programs. You know, for those who are just listening on audio, there was a very cheesy grin on my face and 2 big thumbs up. If you were to create an ideal sex ed program for schools, what do you think young people need to know about?
I try and stay away from anything under the age of 18, like anybody in any way, shape or form, any context. I separate myself out because, and it's not because I don't think that kids need sex education, because I think they do. I remember learning about sex, and the first thing that I thought, here in the UK, the legal age is 16 to have sex. The first thing I thought is I need to have sex before I'm 16. That was the first thing.
I had that exact same thought.
It was just like, I need to have sex before I'm 16, so then I can do something like naughty and illegal, and no one could go back on it. It's done. Do you know what I mean? And that was the thing. And there was no like, I grew up in a Catholic school, and our sex ed was very scientific. And like, we were taught by our biology teacher, and the biology teacher was a great woman, but she was just like, everything needs to be scientific, and if it's not scientific, I'm not going to answer the question. And I had loads of questions.
Scientifically speaking, what is the biological chemical reaction that is occurring when someone participates in rimming? Exactly.
Well, this was the thing. Obviously, like it was all about the science of reproduction as opposed to the pleasure aspect. But I think to answer your question, the things that I would teach if I were in a school scenario. And just to answer my previous statement earlier, the reason why I stay away from it is because of the drama of parents.
Yes.
It's got fuck all to do with kids. It's got like, kids are great, and they're a lot more intelligent than people give them credit for. And like, regardless of what the parents want, the kids will find a way to do the things they want to do. So
100%.
You've got a teenager that's full of fucking hormones and knows something vaguely about sex. They are going to go and dabble. They are going to dabble, like, no way around it. Think about when you were younger. Did you dabble? Of course you fucking did, because everybody dabbles. Like, it's one of those scenarios. So realistically speaking, like, from a ease of life point of view, I'm like, I'll teach the parents and they can teach their own kids. But if it was a situation where I did go into schools and teach kids and about sex ed, the very, 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 very first thing I would ever teach them is consent. It sounds really obvious from our point of view, but kids, especially like in their teenage years, like, bullying is rife because people are trying to work out where they stand. They don't understand social context. They don't understand the bigger world, and why would they? They don't have life experience. Do you know what I mean? And having that moment where they can like understanding what is okay with friends, what is okay with the people they're surrounded by, and stuff like that, and where the lines draw, where the boundaries are, where their own boundaries are, and where the other people's boundaries are, like respecting all those boundaries. Just, it all comes down to conversations about consent, and the conversations aren't happening. They're just not happening at all. So it would definitely start with consent, and then I would talk about the fact that the main thing about sex is obviously it has an element of reproduction, but it's to do with pleasure between the people involved, the consenting adults involved, and it's okay to take, like, there are fun ways to be safe, and you don't have to, like, you don't, like, it there's a weird thing when you're a teenager about things being more exciting when they're not safe, and it's absolute bullshit. It's absolute bullshit. You can do wild, reckless things. I know, I've done most of them. like I finish every stream by turning around and saying, don't do anything I wouldn't do, because if I wouldn't do it, it'll fucking kill you. Because I have had a wild life. But yeah, like you can be safe about these things. You can take the moment to turn around and be like, do you know what? Let's look at all the ways that we want to explore these things. Do your research before you do the act.
Yeah.
And then the third thing, I think the third main thing that I would talk about is atmosphere. Because the most important thing in any intimate relations between any people is atmosphere. It's like, is this a safe place?
I bet right now my wife's hoping I'm listening to this. It's like, light a fucking candle.
But this is the thing, it's about taking that moment and thinking about things from the opposite. Like, they're not the opposite, because you might be like in a throuple or a polyamorous relationship, but thinking about things from the other people's perspective. Turn around and be like, do you know what? What's going to make them feel good? What's going to make them feel special? One of the big things, one of the big issues that people have in sex lives, especially as they get older, is stress. People have no sex drive when they're stressed, or they have too much sex drive when they're stressed. And it can cause massive, massive clashes in relationships. And a lot of that can be petered out by just having the right atmosphere, by just being like, do you know what? Let's take a moment. Let's just have a night off from everything in the world. And there's no pressure. There's no pressure to do anything. Just like light a few candles, watch a movie, have a cuddle. If things start heating up, then things start heating up. If they're not, then that's not a problem. People find it really weird, and there is definitely a taboo that still exists. Because I've had several one-night stands in my life, and people find it really, really weird that I would bring people back to my house. And the first thing I would say to them is, just so you're aware, you don't have to do this. This is okay. And if you want to stick around, you can sleep in the bed. I'll stay downstairs on the sofa. There's no pressure. All right. There's no expectation. Obviously, if things happen, great. I'd love that. But there's no pressure. There's no expectation. And it's really interesting because I had, and I don't have many more, but I had a group of mates that would laugh at that. Mm-hmm. They'd laugh at me for taking the moment to take the pressure off this person. They'd be like, well, no, if they come back to your house, then you're going to fuck. And, well, no, why? That means that you're putting somebody in a position where they feel pressured into doing something they might not be comfortable doing.
Yeah.
You can easily take that pressure off and just be like, do you know what? You don't have to. That's all right. That's okay. We can have a good night together. We can even like sleep in the same bed and watch a movie together. You don't have to fuck me. That's not an expectation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's like, obviously I love the fact that if you were to kind of just say those three things, like, basically consent, safety, and atmosphere as the three titles without going into descriptions, I think a lot of parents would get on board with that. But I totally get what you're saying about it's the parents that you worry about, because I teach mental health in schools, and we're introducing a module on self-harm in January, which is what a lot of parents want. But then a lot of them don't want it. But a lot of parents want it in a my child self-harms, make them stop kind of way. And actually one of the things, and this is a really kind of touchy subject, but actually one of the best things you can actually teach someone who's self-harming is how to be safe whilst they are doing it. Because like you said before, if a person's going to dabble, they're going to dabble. If a person is self-harming, you can help, and you can look at the reasons behind that why, but they should know that if they are going to do it, which there will be relapses, or there will be times that it slips through, that they should be able to do it safely. Because and I often, if someone says, oh, well, I'm not happy with you teaching that, it's like, well, okay, the difference is if we don't teach it, we're not going to make the person self-harm more, like by teaching it. Yeah. We're just going to mean that when they do, they are safe. And the difference isn't that, but what they want as the outcome is my child doesn't self-harm anymore, which is for me to teach that to a group of teachers to then go and interact with 30 to 60 students in a class where it's a level of one-to-one care that we do. Obviously we send people on to different places where they can get one-to-one care from there, and ours is an education/awareness course as opposed to a direct intervention. But it's the parents, they don't like. That was our big thing, was once we went online with a lot of what we did, is the parents could suddenly interact with it. And I had parents complain that, not during any of the stuff I do for the NHS, I do not swear at all, but it's all on the same channel. It was originally through my Twitch. So they come on for the family hour show, and then that same parent would come back on one of my normal mental health shows and be like, And I was getting complaints left, right, and centre sent into the NHS. He was swearing. He had a beer on stream. It's like, and it's just like, and at which point when they said he was swearing, I turned around and said, look, if your child came to you and said, I'm so fucking depressed, and you focused on the word fucking and not the word depressed, that, you know, kind of says.
Oh yeah, but
lot.
this is, I think this is one of the big things about like parenting, and I am not a parent myself, so I can only speak as an outside observer. But I think that one of the big things that a lot of these types of parents have is, are they protecting their child or are they protecting themselves? Mm-hmm. And that is the question. Are they protecting their child from the big bads of the world? Because at the end of the day, their kid is their own person. The kid, they can't control the child. The kid will end up doing what they want to do, regardless of how you fucking behave. Or are you trying to protect yourself from the fact that your child is growing up? Mm-hmm. And that's a really important question. I think that everybody needs. Everybody needs to have that. If you're a parent, whether you're a biological parent or a foster parent or a carer, whatever the scenario, you need to say that moment and be like, do you know what? What is my thing here? Is it the fact that I'm not happy about the fact that my kid's growing up and faster than I would like? Or is it the fact that I am genuinely trying to protect them from the big bads of the world? Because at the end of the day, the big bads of the world is going to find them in one way or another, because the kid's going to get frustrated and they're going to go and do whatever they want to do, because kids do.
Yeah.
They always do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's as well as like, if it's the age where we feel like we need to know absolutely everything that a person's up to and stuff as well. I mean, I've got two boys, they're 17 and 15. So they're that age. And I literally try and the way I try and think, I try to go back into my own shoes when I was that age, and obviously the world's different now. But basically, I think about the fact that, okay, my mum knew I was out. She knew I got back at 2, and she had a relatively happy life. Had she have known every single thing, had she have been able to follow my Instagram story of what I was doing, or at that point, like that she would have properly like shit a brick by watching.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I always got home. I was always safe. You know, there were a couple of things that maybe were a little bit close to not being safe, but ultimately, what she was aware of, and what, like, you know, she wasn't losing sleep at night over it. Whereas so I try to resist that kind of urge. Now, I've not got my kids like low jacked or anything like that.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure the younger one's still in bed. I've not heard him move once yet. But yeah, I've not got them low jacked and all that. And it's like, yeah, try not to sit there and think 100% of the time what they're doing, because there's a little thing our brains do called filling in the blanks, you know, which is if you think back to the good old days of the house phone. Oh, I've not got my house phone on the desk anymore. I think it's just behind me. But if you think of the good old days of the house phone, you ring a friend on the house phone and they don't answer. Your brain goes, they're out, or they're busy, and you get on with your life. You ring a friend on a mobile and they don't answer. They're like, they're blocking me. They hate me. What have they done? And your brain fills in all of these blanks and makes the story terrifying. And I think that's a lot of parents now are facing that. They see their kids are out on Instagram and they're like, you know, they'll see the background. It's like, that's the opposite side of town from where I dropped them off. You know, it's like, what are they doing over there? And they've got this extra bit of information, and it, you know, could be something completely innocuous.
Which is wildly, when you think about, like, like my parents, I said, were very, very open parents and what have you, but they controlled what they could control.
Yeah.
They very well, like, and I very much admire my parents, and I will be the first person to say that you choose your family. It's not blood relation. It's who you choose to be.
Yeah.
Your thing. If you've got a toxic member of family, cut them the fuck out of your life. Do you know what I mean? I am the first person to say that. I am very, very lucky that my chosen family is also my blood related. Because my parents were really like awesome. I was a little shit. All right. I was a proper little shit. And like for example, my parents knew full well that I was going to go clubbing.
Yeah. Like,
as soon as I've been drinking since the age of 10, because I discovered beer. And my parents were like, nah, this is going to be thing. It's like, you can have one beer with us because we know that you're going to go drink. But if you're in our presence, at least we can then control how much you drink.
Yeah.
They knew I was going to go clubbing. And the deal was, they were fine with me going out and going clubbing, so long as they took me there and they brought me back.
Yeah.
And that way they knew I was always safe on the way there and the way back. Because they knew, regardless of the scenario, I was going to go because I was that level of little shit. Like whether it meant climbing out my window and going out with my mates, that I was going to do it. So they controlled what they could control in order to maintain as much safety for me as possible, which I really, really appreciate. And as a perspective of how much of a little shit I was, like there was a point when I was 16 and I was at a house party and I was very, very drunk, very, very drunk. And we went to, I was in, I won't say where I was. I was in a city that wasn't my hometown. And I went with some friends to a petrol station, a gas station, to get more beers because I looked a little bit older than everybody else. So I was like, cool, we're going to go get some more beers. Went into the petrol station, got more beers, like literally walked out the house, walked around the corner, got into the petrol station, got more beers. Then came back out and I woke up naked next to a woman who was also naked with a guy at the end of the bed wearing none of his own clothes but all of ours. And I was in a completely different city to the one I'd started in. I was a completely different city because I'd got out of the petrol station and got in someone's car and they drove off with me to another house party in a different city. Like hazard of a human being. Like I should not have survived. like it's one of those scenarios. Like so my parents controlled what they could control in order to maintain as much safety as they possibly could because I was reckless. I was a very, very, very reckless teen. And I can only imagine what parents go through now if their kids were anything like me. Like, I feel very sorry for my parents.
Well,
you know?
I think that's it. Like when you say they controlled what they could control and that the options for what you can control now are higher. And but also the options for what you can kind of like look in on or peek in on, because like, you know, you might, your child might not have put anything on their story, but you might know their friend's Instagram.
Yeah, and the temptation to check on that must be.
Well, it's like my mum, for example, she has like a security system on her house that she can view the cameras from when she's away, and when we're on holiday, she will just look at the cameras sometimes, and like I'm just like, you know, I couldn't do it. Like I don't want to be sat there. Like I don't worry about my house when I go away, but I think that if I could look on it, I'd look on it more, because let's face it, I check my social media stats obsessively, even though I tell people not to do that and tell myself not to do it. So if I had if I had the availability to, it's like I don't. On social media, because I check my stats, I refuse to go anywhere near one of those things that tells you who unfollowed you, like, because I don't need that information. And I know that despite the fact that I know that I don't need that information, I'd still look. So the temptation is absolutely there for parents now to
but not only for parents, like I think one of the most toxic things that has ever existed, or one of the absolute toxic things that has ever come about, is the red function.
Oh yeah.
When you send somebody a text message or a WhatsApp or a message on Messenger or what have you, and it says, this person has read it. Yep. And I'm like, how fucking toxic is that? You don't know what's going on in their lives. Maybe they're having a shit. Maybe they're out partying. Maybe they're like doing stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like, you don't know what's going on, but all you see is that they've read it and chosen not to respond. Yep. And you're just like, how horrific is that? Yeah. Like, here's a way to build up your social anxiety and your feeling of worthlessness. Yeah, this person fucking hates you. They've chosen to ignore your text. No, they haven't. They've just got a life and they've got stuff going on in there. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, that's one of my favorite things to talk about, especially around adults that have lived long enough to have been around the regular house phone, because kids mostly have just ignored mobiles now. And like I said, I call it fill in the blanks. I've got a whole video. Well, I've got a podcast episode and a whole video about this. But it's the fact that, I call it the 2 blue ticks, because I'm like, you send them and they don't answer the phone, so you think that they hate you, but you're not. You need to be doubly sure. They might have missed it. There's a possibility in your mind that they may have missed out that you phone them. So you send them a WhatsApp message and you get the 1 grey tick, you get the 2 grey ticks, and you get the 2 blue ticks, and then it's that. But I'll turn around to the audience at the end of this, and I'll say, so have you ever been like about to, like, you've just got a message from someone and it says something and you can't give them a quick response? It requires more than a quick yes or no. And you're just about to go into the toilet, or you're just about to go in for dinner with your friends or your family, or you're about to drive. And you say to yourself, I'll get back to that later.
And everyone in the crowd's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I then go, ever forgotten? And the faces. That's like, honestly, it's one of the most sad, you said about performing. That reaction's one of the favorite things of my performance, where they suddenly go, shit. And I'm like, they're sat there thinking that if someone it doesn't reply to their text, that they hate them, that they ignore them. And you tell yourself that story on repeat. And if you tell yourself a story on repeat, you believe it. And if you believe it, you feel like shit. Whereas the old days, nope, they're not answering. Phone down, go watch Coronation Street, get on with your life.
But what's really interesting is it's so ingrained in society. I realize we've gone way away from sex education now.
We're gonna pull it back to it in a minute.
All right, let me just say though that it's really interesting in regards to like the society thing, because society is so used to it now that people apologize to me for not getting back immediately. And I'm like, I don't care. You got a life. So, I mean, I just respond when you respond. I genuinely don't give a shit. If it's been like a week or so and it's something that's genuinely urgent, then fair enough. I might chase it up and be like, do you know what? This is something I genuinely need to have some information on. Give me some information. Yeah. But I respect that people have lives. Hell, I know. My life's ridiculously busy. Yeah,
I tell people to feel free to prompt me, because some people feel self-conscious about prompting. But I tell people that if they don't get a reply to me from a certain amount of time, I am very forgetful once the notification's open. So, then someone's not likely to get a red notification on me unless I don't open them until I'm ready to respond to them. Now that's the way I deal with it. Okay. So the person doesn't get a red notification. But yeah. So what I was going to bring it back to with sex education is, what is the most common thing? So we talked about like bringing it into schools. What is the most common thing that people struggle with? That like maybe it could be 2 or 3 different things that you see come up a lot.
I think a lot of the chat that we have in my streams and areas revolves a lot around kink. Yeah. There's a lot of shame around kink and fetishes and stuff, and there should be no shame around kink and fetishes. You can't control what you're attracted to, but you can control how you act about it, which is a very important differentiation. There is so I think a lot of that stuff comes in, and people ask about stuff, or they feel uncomfortable about it, or they ask about how to go about it safely or what have you. But 9 times out of 10, like whatever people ask me about, it always comes down to atmosphere. Like I promote atmosphere like nobody's business, just because it's one of those things. Like if you go into a theater, you've got you go into a cinema. More people have been to cinemas. I'll go with cinema. You go into the cinema, you've got that entire encompassing. It's dark. There's people around you, but everyone's quiet. You're in a nice, comfortable seat. You've got the things. You've got the entire you are swallowed by the movie and the atmosphere that the movie creates. Whereas when you sat on your sofa, there's a difference there. Yeah. And it's the same with sex. It's the same with sex, whatever the scenario happens to be. I don't know whether there's any like specific recurring themes in regards to. Usually, it tends to be. I'd say probably the most recurring theme is people having trouble with their partners in regards to one or both of them not being in the mood, and they feel like they should be in the mood. And a lot of that, the real problem with stuff like that is the fact that when you feel like you should be doing something, you put pressure on yourself, and that makes everything worse. Yeah. That makes everything worse. Like it's you are not going to do your best if you feel, especially in the bedroom, you're not going to be able to provide the best experience if you feel like you're obligated to do something. Yeah. It's that thing. And there's this big thing about like, people say like, enthusiastic consent. That's been a big thing that's been going around for the past 5 years. About people are like, you don't just need consent, you need enthusiastic consent. And that's not always possible. Like if you're trying for a baby, for example, sometimes you're just doing it because the doctors say that this is the best time to do it. And you're like, all right, we'll get it done. And it's not enthusiastic consent, but the consent is there and the willingness is there and the understanding is there. So enthusiastic consent is not always there, but so long as the impetus isn't pressure. Yeah. So the impetus isn't one person pressuring another person. It's together we have decided that this is an important thing that we do together. And if you take that pressure off, if you turn around and be like, do you know what? Let's have a real nice night together. Let's create an atmosphere, create a cozy atmosphere, light the fire, put some candles on, maybe put some music on in the background and just talk and chat and hug and hold each other, and if things start to evolve, they do, and if things start to go somewhere and then somebody turns around and goes, you know what, like I'm not feeling it, it's like, cool, let's ease it back off. If you take away the pressure to perform, like it just makes everything easier, and it means that there seems to be like a really strong importance, and this is a lot of down to like media bread and expectation and stuff about how when you're doing it, you need to do the deed. You can have a great time without doing the deed. You can have a wonderful experience without like physically doing it. And there's always this question about like, what is sex? What is sex? Well, between a heterosexual couple, it's penetrative, right? Well, in a gay couple, it's also penetrative, but in a lesbian couple, like, is it also down to penetration, or can they have sex in other ways that don't require penetration? And if that's so, does that open up the entire repertoire of what constitutes as sex to every other gender and every other set of genitalia? And if that's the case, then you can have sex without doing the deed. You can have that intimate time with each other where you genuinely do enjoy each other's company and enjoy each other's like presence together and intimacy, and that moment where you are sharing that moment together, whether you be 20 years married or whether you be like first time lovers. Like, you can have that moment and have sex for the intensive purposes of the word without it pushing too far. Like, I think there's a lot of pressure on what is expected of you for all genders. I will be the first person to turn around and say, for those people that have penises, cis men especially, there is a lot of pressure on you. So if you're doing it with somebody that you want, you will get a hard on, and you will do the rumpy pumpy bumping uglies. You will do the rutting and bits and pieces. And the fact of the matter is, sometimes you don't. I'm the first person to say I definitely haven't. There's been a scenario where I was with a long-term friend I was hugely attracted to. We had a lot of history together where we'd sort of in and out of each other's lives, and we'd finally got to a point where we were like, do you know what? Let's fucking do it. Let's fucking do it. And we didn't we didn't do the penetrative side of it because like at the end of the day, it just wasn't right. Like there was pressure on me. I just didn't feel it. It wasn't whatever was going on with my body, the absolute drive and arousal and joy that was in my brain ready to get down to business was there, like 100%. But there was a disconnect with the rest of my body where my body was just like, what are we doing? Oh, you're naked now. Oh, you're naked and they're naked. Are we, is this a thing that we're meant to be doing? I'm not entirely sure what's happening here. Are we, and that happens. And that's not only okay, it's completely fucking normal. These things happen, and it's all right to have a disjoint between your brain and your body. It's all right to have a disjoint between your body and your brain. Maybe your body is fully aroused and ready to go for it, but your brain's like, nah, I'm not here. Do you know what I mean? I'm not in that place. And that's okay and normal and should be taken into consideration. And there should be no pressure. I'm going to take a moment to talk about heterosexuality specifically, mainly because it is perceived as a social norm, and the understanding of social pressures within sex are seen that way. So if you've got a guy and they can't get a hard on, the guy feels shit because they can't do it, even though they really, really want to do it. The girl feels shit because she's like, oh my God, I must be absolutely hideous if I can't get this guy hard, because media and the world has made us believe that, like, if a guy and a girl are attracted to each other, they should do the horizontal tango, and there is no other options. That is the only option. Oh my God, this can only be and it's like, it's never as simple as that. It's never as simple as that. And not only is it not as simple as that, it's okay for it to not happen like that. And there should be no pressure. It should just be like, cool, this didn't happen. Let's keep going. Let's have a good time. There's other things that we can do to cause each other pleasure and be in that moment together. And if you take that pressure off, it's suddenly just, there's no shame and there's no worry. And it just becomes a better time for everybody.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, I think, to quote Frankie Goes to Hollywood with relax, don't do it. That's actually based in a psychological principle called paradoxical intent, where the more you focus on something, the harder it becomes. So like everyone will have experienced this with sleep. If you've got to get somewhere at like 7 o'clock in the morning and you don't go to bed until like 2 and you're like, holy shit, I've really got to get to sleep now. I've got to get to sleep. It's like, I've only got 5 hours until the morning. And then you keep on thinking, I've just got to sleep. And no matter what you do, the more you think about sleeping, the more awake it makes you feel. Yeah. And the same is extremely true. If like someone's, there is actually a clip of me saying this at some point, because I kind of said it as gotta come like that, and then everyone thought that was hilarious, so that got clipped and probably shows up on people's channels when I get shouted out. But if you're sat there thinking, I've got to come, I've got to get hard, I've got to I've got to get wet, I've got whatever, and you're putting that level of pressure on yourself, your body will act in the opposite way. In fact, it's
defense mechanism.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, there's as I said, that's what you're saying. There's backed up by both science and Frankie Goes to Hollywood. So
always good.
Yeah. So if it's got science, Frankie, and Valen, that's the trifecta right there. That is the holy trinity of validation of a theory, and that passes the scientific method. So where does that come in with regards to? And I don't you can let me know whether these things are related or not. So, but like obviously you say kink comes up a lot.
Yes.
Where does compatibility of people's like level of kink come into this? And is that similar, or is it different than a compatibility of people's sex drive?
It's different to sex drive for sure. A lot of kinks. So a lot of people will come and speak to me either in the stream or because there's a great thing about it's a good thing and a bad thing about Twitch and live streaming in general is there's a certain anonymity to it. Mm-hmm. You can be pretty anonymous. Obviously, that means the trolls can come out in force, but on the other side of things, they do. But on the other side of things, it means that people can ask the questions they feel embarrassed about or self-conscious about asking any other time. So people do say things in chat, and that's okay. I love answering questions and stuff. And some people send me DMs if they're feeling particularly self-conscious about something and they're not sure whether it'll come out as them.
Yeah.
But around how to introduce kinks to your partner, how to turn around and be like, do you know what? And let's be clear. I just want to take a moment to say, like, there's a difference between a kink and a fetish. So a kink, to the understanding of, a kink is something that is preferable in sex, whereas a fetish is something that is more or less mandatory.
Right.
So a kink, like a lot of people have a kink for lingerie. People love lingerie. People don't like to think of it as a kink because it's so normalized, but it is. You love lingerie. It's like, okay, this is really heightening the senses here. Then it's a kink for lingerie. Whereas a fetish is something that needs to be there. I have a friend who is a glorious individual who I love very dearly, and him and his wife, he's like, he has a fetish for Hawaiian shirts. He just can't.
I've got loads.
Yeah, you got loads. Perfect. Wonderful.
I've got one with Stitch from Lilo and Stitch on it. It's horrendously beautiful.
Oh, there is something garish about the beauty there. Or beautiful about the garishness. Interesting. But yeah, like she's and they're very comfortable. Like she's just like, if I want to be in the mood and get things going, I just put on a Hawaiian shirt and game on. Do you know what I mean? And I'm like, fucking hey, like that works for you.
Convenient.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. Very, very much so for her. But it's one of those things that I don't know why it happened, don't know what the scenario is there, but that's one of their fetishes, and that's okay. That's all right. Do you know what I mean? It's that wonderful moment. But in regards to like introducing kinks to a partner, like first things first, you need to establish good communication with that partner.
I knew this would come up. I wrote this earlier.
Yeah, communication. Yes. Yes, 100%.
That was what I was scribbling down before. I was going to ask you what's the most important thing, and I was hoping you were going to say that. And I was like, yes, nailed it.
Yeah, 100%. If you want to get involved with a partner or multiple partners or whatever, communication should always be the main thing.
Yeah.
Like, realistically speaking, how are you expecting to know the ins and outs of another person on an intimate level without like being open and honest with them. You can't expect them to be open and honest with you if you're not open and honest with them.
Yeah.
All right. Now, there is a difference. If you've not had good communication, you're not going to immediately come out and be like, hey, can I rub my cock in your toes? Like, that's like, do you know what I mean? Like, there's an easing into it process. There's like, okay, let's talk about these things. Let's establish a good communication between you and your partner, or you and your partners first, so that you've got to that point where you're like, do you know what? I am comfortable and they are comfortable, and I'm comfortable within the dynamic that we have, that I can be like, do you know what? I really want to dabble in something that I'm intrigued about, but I'm a little bit self-conscious about. Can we talk about it?
Yeah.
I'm really interested in whatever the scenario is. I'm really interested in Hawaiian shirts. I'm really interested in feet. I'm really interested in being tickled. There are kinks and fetishes for everything, pretty much. And like that's a good start of being like, communication's always the start. Now, where you were talking about like the separation out between like a clashing of sexualities or a clashing of sex accelerators.
Let's start with a clashing of kinks to start up because I feel like they are going to be two very different things, and I don't want to kind of. So let's say someone has a kink, or even now that I also thank you for the definition, because I actually didn't know the difference. It's very convenient, and it's nicely easily packaged as well. So let's say someone has within a couple or a throuple or a whatever, they have a clashing of kinks, or the person is significantly more kinky than the other person, or a person, or in particular, I imagine a fetish would call, if someone had a fetish and the other person wasn't prepared to meet that fetish at all, I imagine that would cause a lot more friction than, say, if someone wasn't willing to meet a kink, because a kink, it's like, okay, I prefer this, but if you don't do it, we're all good. We've got options.
It depends how strong the kink is. I've known it destroy relationships. I've known people have a clash of kinks or a clash of fetishes, or one person's completely vanilla is what we call it. I don't like the term vanilla because it implies that sex is boring, but sex isn't boring. It's just a different way of doing things.
Unless, of course, you're the bare naked ladies who like vanilla. It's the finest of the flavors. Exactly.
That is true. That is true. Vanilla does go with everything.
Weird reference that about 4% of chat will get, but...
That's fine. It's fine. There'll be people on the podcast that are like, here we go, this guy.
I'll do it as a full song later.
Perfect. You know? So yeah, there's like things where people are vanilla, and I've seen it absolutely not only crumble a relationship, but ruin friendships as well. Like, they can't even be friends with each other because of the scenario, because suddenly, they're talking about that pressure side of things. It's like, oh, this person's not good enough for this person. Well, no, you're both good enough for each other. It's just that you both have different tastes.
Yes.
This isn't, it really fucks me off how so many people consider every human in the entire world in one line. 7.5 billion people in one line, and you are either better or worse than the people next to you. And it's like, why? Why are you fucking like this? What is this? Like, oh, well, they're better than me. Are they? Maybe they're just a different person that has different tastes and values and things, and that's okay. Do you know what I mean?
Not to mention that we cherry pick a quality on that line. They're better than me in what capacity? It's like, well, they're a better 100%. Singer than me. Yeah, but you're a better cook than they are. It's like, so...
Exactly. What the fuck does it matter? Do you know what I mean? It's one of those scenarios. It's like, yeah, I suppose it's like grass is always greener scenario, but it just drives me up the wall. I just don't understand this whole weird line thing where people consider themselves better or worse than other people. But anyway, back to the clashing of kinks thing. I've seen it do it. I've seen... It really depends on, again, the communication side of things and knowing what you're at. And you can part amicably if that is something that is like, okay, I really want to, like, this is something that I avidly want to try and get into. And the other person's like, no, this is a hard no for me. Then they'll be like, okay, well, where do we stand here? Like, communication, is it something that they can do without? Is it something that they can choose to put aside and for the sake of the relationship, or is it something that they really need to go at it? And then you've got to decide, is it okay for that person to go and get that from somebody else?
Yeah.
I know a lot of couples, because let's be very, very clear that fetish is not sex. Like kink, BDSM, fetish, that entire ballpark is not sex. And this is something that a lot of people don't seem to get.
Okay, I don't get it, so maybe this is like.
Well, there you go. This is
illuminate.
So I know a lot of couples that are together and they have a healthy sex relationship together, but one party of them goes to see a dominatrix, or goes to see a thing, and that doesn't mean that they go and have sex with that dom. Like the vast majority of doms that I know do not have sex with their clients. They provide a service, and the service is flogging them or tying them up or demeaning them or what have you. It does not have to. In fact, the vast majority of the time, it does not include any kind of sex.
Right.
Obviously, it can, and there are doms out there that do offer those services, but like as a thing for listeners now, don't expect to go to a dominatrix and expect to fuck them, because that isn't a standard state of being. That isn't a standard state of being by any stretch of the imagination. And that comes in the negotiation with the dom. There's a lot of communication side of things, but that's probably an entire podcast in and of itself. But yeah, like that needs to be very, very clear. And there are people that do go and just like, do you know what? I have this craving to be either topping somebody else and flogging them and tying them up and doing the BDSM, the classic BDSM stuff, or being the bottom and being the submissive person who is flogged and tied up and what have you. And they go and get that from somebody else with the communication, the understanding, and more to the point, the absolute trust within the relationship. Relationships are all about trust. I'm sure you've probably talked about this a million times, but relationships are about trust, and you can't have trust if you have doubts.
Yeah. And
if you turn around and like, do you know what? Open and honest communication, as we talked about before, open and honest. This is a scenario. I would like to go and see this person. If you would like to come and meet the dominatrix and be like, hey, have a conversation with them, have a conversation as a couple, and be like, do you know what? Let's have a go for a coffee with this dom, talk about what we could do like together and what is comfortable with you and me and them, so that like it's mind blowing that people think that it's always this super seedy, dark, getting away from your wife to go get beaten by a latex clad woman or what have you. It's not that case at all. It doesn't work like that. And the vast majority of doms that I'm aware of, the ones that I know, will happily go for a coffee with a couple and be like, okay, so what is it that you need from this? And what is it that you want from this? Okay, what is it you're comfortable with? Let's talk about this. Let's discuss like limits. Let's discuss boundaries. Let's discuss where you're at. And it shouldn't get to a point where it becomes like therapeutic, but it can do. Right. Do you know what I mean? It certainly can do.
Yeah. Cool. So it's seeing that as a separate service outside of sex, i.e., for example, I don't know how to cut and colour hair, so I do not cut and colour my wife's hair. She goes and gets that done from somebody else. Ideally, it would be great if I could do it and I'd go through all the training and all the rest of it, because she'd save a shit ton of money. But you know, and she wouldn't have to leave the house. But that being said, a hairdresser's awesome. But yeah, so it's like seeing it like that, really.
Yeah, it's a service.
Yeah,
it's a service, and it's people think it's weird because the media.
It's just not normalized.
It's not normalized, and the media has done a massive job of making it sound seedy and perverse at all times. But it's not. It's like I said, it can be quite therapeutic. I'm not going to say it's a replacement for therapy, because it's definitely not a replacement for therapy, but it can be therapeutic.
And in a similar way, normalizing it would be better in actually even making it safer and making it more accessible.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yes and no. I'd say 90% yes and 10% no.
Right. Okay.
And I'm very hesitant about talking about this, but I will talk about it here. The reason why I say 90% yes and 10% no is because you're entirely right. 90%, if we normalized kinks and understanding of kinks and fetishes and where they sit within human psyche and human sexuality, that would be amazing, absolutely fantastic and glorious, and both safe and beneficial for everybody involved, and all those people that would like to dabble in it as well. I say 10% no, only because I am very aware that part of the reason why people dabble in kinks and fetishes is because they're considered taboo.
Right.
There is
so similar to how
always-
you said, when you realized that you had, sex was at 16, you were adamant that you were having sex before 16 because so part of the attraction is the taboo.
Part of the attraction.
So there's
the
actually a benefit from normalized to an extent.
Yeah. And
Okay, I like it. I like it a lot.
Like it's and it's not that I'm against normalizing it, because I'm very, 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 very much for normalizing it. I'm just not wanting to overshadow the fact that there is definitely an element of it that is attractive because it's taboo.
Yeah.
Just like there's an attraction when you're a teenager to I don't know, steal a Mars bar or like it's about pushing those boundaries and seeing what you can get away with and seeing what you can do. And there is a thrill in that in and of itself, providing obviously openly saying that there's no harm comes to other people. It's all done between consenting adults, etc. Like those are the prerequisites therein. But there is definitely an element of taboo about it.
Yeah.
And I've done it. I mean, I've done it with both fetish, but I remember being a teenager and stealing a belt from somewhere, and my heart was racing, the adrenaline was going. It was just like, oh my God, like I'm wearing this belt and I'm just walking out with it. And like doing it. And I can see why there's the appeal there. I can see the elements of it and the taboo nature of it for sure. Because it does get the heart racing. It does get the adrenaline going and the thrill seeking aspects of it. Little adrenaline junkies that we are.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so let's bring that into the concept of sex drive then. So like if people, so I imagine that compatibility being the same sort of the sort of underpinning principle of compatibility, but the differences there. Like, what do you get people often talking about, like differences in sex drive? And for example, I'll throw a question that was in chat earlier because it's very appropriate now, which was the question was how to keep a partner happy who's got a higher sex drive if you don't, was posed as a question earlier.
That is a that's an interesting question. One. That is a big question, and there's no. I would like to openly say there's no easy answer to it, because it does depend on the people involved and the dynamic within the people involved. If you are particularly open-minded and secure in your relationship and what have you, obviously there is the option of being an open relationship and letting them go off and get with other people to satiate that drive. And I'm very hesitant about using the word sex drive because it kind of is like one word for a very complex series of things.
Yeah.
Like it makes it sound like there is that there isn't a myriad of like inputs that will affect it. There's a brilliant book called Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski, which really goes into like sexual brakes and sexual accelerators. So it's like certain things will push on the sexual accelerator, which will push things that get you in the mood, get you horny, get you going. And then there's other things that'll push the sexual brakes. And it'll be like, okay, what is it? What are the stresses in your life that are causing you to be apprehensive? Is there an apprehension but within your relationship and the dynamic within your relationship? The pressure to perform, all sexual breaks, all things that push on that sexual break. And it's which one weighs out. Is it like a go-kart? Is it the sexual accelerator that is winning, in which case go have a wonderful time and bump the uglies? Or is it the sexual break that's winning out and stopping you from doing that? And especially if you're in a relationship where your partner has a very high sex drive and you don't, the pressure to perform will be part of the reason why you don't have a high sex drive.
Yeah.
Because you are worried that you are not going to be able to keep up.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is the option of allowing them to go and get with other people. Obviously there's elements of jealousy within that and understanding where you stand on that. But what I would say in that regard is also try and think about the reason why you might not have a high sex drive. Like, what is it that especially if you've never had a high sex drive, that's one thing. But if you used to have a really intimate, heavy, passionate time when you first got together, and over time that's dwindled, what is it that has changed? Is it stresses at work? Is it the fact that you've got too comfortable with each other and you just don't see each other in the same way again? Is there a way to rekindle that? Is there a way to go out and do something a little bit wild that gets your blood pumping again and makes you see them in the same way? Or things that you could revisit, like maybe you did flamenco dancing together at some point. Is there ways that you can do things together that will rekindle that passion? But also, what is it that's pressing on your sexual break? What is it like? Is it the pressure to perform? Is it the stresses in your life? Is it the fact that you've got shitloads of other stresses with family or friends or other bits and pieces? Is there a way that you can realize? I mean, that goes into a big conversation about negating stress and understanding stuff, but there are ways that you can take yourself away from those things, and there are ways that can help that out, and they may help, but at the end of the day, it needs to be understood that they might not. You know, I'm not going to turn around and say this is the fix all. This is the way that this is going to like fix your relationship or what have you. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But again, communication without judgment is really fucking important.
Yeah.
Because if you turn around, like I know a lot of people will not want to have that communication because they don't want the confrontation of turning around and be like, do you know what? I don't feel like I'm enough for you because you've got a really high sex drive and I don't. Or I don't feel like I feel like I'm too much for you because I have a really high sex drive and you don't. And confrontation is only as bad as you make it. You can have a conversation and it'd be perfectly fine if you approach it from the right set and turn around and go, okay, let me take a moment to think about that, and be okay with saying, let me take a moment to think about that. Because it's a lot of it comes down to communication. A lot of it comes down to communication and understanding of where each other stands and talking about what you can do together to open that up. Also, don't be afraid to involve a variety of different sex toys. There are a cosmic fuck ton of sex toys out there, friends. An absolute
cosmic fuck ton.
Yeah, cosmic. But there's so many. And there it needs to be also like talking about sex toys as well. Here was you at the beginning saying that I was going to talk for ages, and you're right, I am.
I'm loving it. I've got like 3 more questions I want to make sure we ask. But other
fantastic.
than that,
that's all right.
We're still on schedule. It's good. Keep going.
That's good. Talk about the
toys. Cosmic fuck ton, I believe.
The cosmic fuck ton. There's so many sex toys out there for all varieties of genitalia. There's even sex toys out there now that are gender affirming sex toys. So if you were born in the wrong body, you are a trans person within yourself, there are sex toys out there that are designed for you to help you feel less gender dysmorphia, which is beautiful, absolutely fantastic. Like they're great, they're glorious and fantastic. But there it needs to be said, there is a taboo. There is a taboo with, and I've talked about this on my stream and my podcast, to be honest with you, where especially for cis women, and cis means the same as a cis person, for the explanation for those people that might not understand, is somebody who associates with the gender that they were assigned at birth. I was a cis man. I was called male at birth. I consider myself to be male now. I am a cis man. The trans person, like cis literally means is Latin for the same side of, whereas trans is the opposite side of, which is why we have transatlantic, transpennine, that kind of stuff. So a trans person is somebody who was born in the wrong body and needs to move away from that to become the gender that they know they actually are. And we are very much pro-trans people. Yes, wonderful. We love this. Be your amazing self. So there is a taboo for cis women where you shouldn't enjoy sex. You shouldn't enjoy sex, and you should save yourself so that you have as few lovers as possible, and you should not go out and fuck people even though you want to, because it's that way you become a slag, and that's bad. Which is bullshit. But then on the other side of things, there is also a thing for cis men where you should go out and sleep with as many women as possible. Yeah, that is your thing. That is your goal of your younger years, is to go out and sleep with as many human beings as possible. Go do the thing. Yeah. And then that also transcends to sex toys. If you're a cis woman, you should have sex toys, and you should pleasure yourself with those sex toys instead of going out and sleeping with other people. Whereas men, you shouldn't need sex toys, because you should be going out and getting all of that hoot hang or whatever they call it. Do you know what I mean? Like, you shouldn't need sex toys because you're going and sleeping around.
Yeah.
Which is mind-blowing to me, because the amount of sex toys there are out there for all genitalias and all genders is mind-blowing.
I'm just going to put a few on my wish list and see what my community do.
I encourage it. I actively encourage it. And I actively encourage it within relationships as well. I actively encourage it. I'm like, you're in a relationship, dabble the fuck together. Do you know what I mean? Especially if you're in a situation where you're not like you're the sex drive thing.
Yeah.
I would strongly recommend that the person that has the higher sex drive dabble with sex toys by themselves, but also see if your partner is willing to get involved with that. Maybe they could stand there and sit there, lie next to you and watch you do it. Get that moment of being like, do you know what, this person, and and it doesn't need to be super like cringeworthy. It doesn't need to be that moment where you're just like, okay, I'm watching you masturbate and this is weird. It can be a really intimate moment where you're just like, do you know what, I'm watching my partner in pleasure. Mm-hmm. I'm watching them, and you don't have to be involved. You don't have to. You can obviously do things if you want to do, maybe rub their shoulders or comb your fingers through the hair or what have you. You can have that moment of intimacy with them without having the sex with them. Mm. They're having the sex by themselves, and you're just there as part of it. You're along for the ride and enjoying that intimate moment between you and your partner. It's beautiful. It can be beautiful. Things are only weird if you make them weird. Because if we're honest about this, sex is fucking weird. If you actually think about it, my jiggly bits are going to be pushed against your jiggly bits, and entertainment will commence. It's weird. It's hilarious and weird. Like there's no way around it.
And magnificent.
And magnificent. It can be the most hilarious thing and also the most intimate thing. It's such a. This is the reason why I'm so passionate about it, is because it literally is the most hilarious thing that I've ever done in my life, but also the most intimate and beautiful thing that I've ever done in my life. And that's what makes it so fascinating and beautiful and intriguing for me. As you can tell, I'm a very passionate person about this subject.
No, it's not coming across. I think you need to dial it up a little bit. You're coming across as quite ambivalent right now. Okay, sweet. So with all of this in mind, we've talked about it for, what it maybe could, how it could maybe be better in schools. We've talked about how a few things that maybe some more adults need to kind of find out about. Where does this all fit with being able to teach this on social media? Like how free are you to talk about this? Where are the lines? What are the things that you can't, like, obviously you can't talk about what you can't talk about, but you can maybe hint towards it. But and also to throw in a separate question that's to do, like, that's sort of on this line at the same time. Does that need to be like, you've chosen to have an 18 plus stream, because you said you don't want to be speaking to anybody under that age about it. Well, you'd want to, but we covered all that earlier. But if you're talking about like your own proclivities and your own kinks, etc., should you really need to have an 18 plus stream, or is it,
I would always urge that anybody that is talking about anybody who's talking about sex should always have an 18 plus stream. Just because it saves you from the drama. It saves you from the drama, and no, you don't need that in your life, and nobody fucking needs that in their life. I also am very, very aware that the 18 plus on my stream is there because the banter and the humor and the way that we are is very much 18 plus. It's very much for adults. Yeah. As well as the drama side of things. Because if I'm the way that I teach adults, and I think you're probably aware of this yourself, but having done like adult education and also gone out to schools and stuff, the way you teach adults is very, very different to the way you teach kids. Yeah. The way you teach kids is far more structured. It's far more, okay, these are the things that we're going to talk about because we need to ease you into these topics at a rate that you understand them. Yeah. Whereas when you teach adults, you can be like, this is my experience. Compare it to your own experiences and adapt accordingly. Like that is like, it's a very different dynamic. So if you wanted to become a sex educator on Twitch that does talk to children about bits and pieces and what have you, I'd be prepared for the drama. But at the same time, have you can take away the 18 plus thing, but just make sure you structure it like a full on education. This is a lesson. This is not a banter between people. This is not open conversation and debate. This is a lesson. on sex and education and consent and all that jazz.
Yeah.
I've taken, for the ease of mind, I've taken the back practice of just being like, do you know what? I'll educate the parents, I'll educate the teachers, and they can educate the kids because I can't be fucking asked with that shit. I can't remember what else you were asking me about then.
So what are the kind of things that what are the limits to talking about it?
Limits depend on the terms of service of the relevant area that you are in. I'm very clued up on the terms of service of the sexual nudity policy of Twitch. I thought I was pretty clued up on the terms of service of YouTube, but apparently not clued up enough.
But what do you know why you were?
No, I've got no idea.
That's a shame. Well, it's not a shame.
I've got no idea.
It is a shame, actually. No, it's definitely a shame.
It is genuinely a shame. But I mean, but even for banter purposes, it is a shame because I would like to know. For those people that don't know, I was deleted off YouTube with no understanding. They just said I'd infringed the sexual content and nudity policy. Didn't explain why. Didn't explain what video it was that it had done. And I tried to appeal it and say I'll delete whatever needs deleting, or just some kind of understanding. But I didn't hear anything back. Which is fine, which is okay. Like I was a very small YouTuber. I understand they're a massive company and they've got a million things to do. It's just a bit of a shit thing for me, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, in regards to it, it just depends really on like your, like the terms of service of the platform that you're doing it on. And more to the point as well, what you're comfortable talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's certain subjects about, because I know that your channel, you are not a safe space. You are an open space where people can talk about what they want as long as they don't go into detail, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas mine is a safe space because I'm very aware that an awful lot of people, like I'm going to say people in general, have a lot of trauma in their history. Mm-hmm. Because society is a fucking horrid place, and it has been for many, many years, and it's getting better, but it's still a long way off. And I don't want people to come in and be like, hey, I've got a kink about CNC, which is consensual, non-consensual, and trigger fuck tons of people that have had issues with consent in their past. Like, I don't want that. Mm-hmm. That is not something that I'm prepared to talk about. I'll happily talk about it at some point because it's very much a fetish in and of itself. But it's not something that I will not risk triggering all of these people in my community to have that discussion. Same as like pedophilia and stuff like that. It's a massive subject that needs to be talked about, but it's not one that I'm prepared to talk about within my thing because of my comfort levels and more to the point, the comfort levels of my community. Like it's not something that I want to dabble into. It's also hugely controversial with a variety of different opinions and views on it, and I can do without the drama. So it's one of those scenarios. So I think if you are going into that kind of thing, the first thing is very much where do you stand in your comfortable levels? What are you prepared to talk about? Yeah. Then look at the terms of service of whatever platform you're talking about it on, and be like, right, okay, what are the things that are going to get me deleted? What are the things that are going to like remove me from the platform and usurp all of my influence, that all of the work, the hard work that I've done so far? And I know that from both sides of it. So like literally in this scenario. Yeah. So yeah, but I don't know. I wouldn't say that there are any like big limits other than those two. Because like they can't be. Everyone needs to be able to talk about stuff. And the real problem with like taboo subjects is the fact that if people can't talk about stuff, things get worse. Mm-hmm. Things escalate to levels because if they've got no place to go and speak about things, then they're gonna try and bumblefuck their way through understanding it themselves. Mm-hmm. And that can be horribly detrimental to them and people around them. Yeah. Like if you don't talk about shibari and understand that you need to be taught shibari. Shibari is Japanese rope bondage. Right. You can do some people some horrible damage. Mm-hmm. You can like fuck people up with like blood clots and restricting things and stuff like that. Be taught, do your education. But if you can't talk about that anywhere, then you're going to try and do it yourself and you'll probably fuck it up. Probably do it wrong.
So to play devil's advocate for a second, and to be perfectly honest, I think I'd very much struggle if someone came in to talk about what do you sort of see, CNC?
CNC, yes. Consensual, non-consensual.
Right, so I imagine that means one person's consenting while the other person isn't.
No, no, it does not.
So I don't know.
I'm happy you brought this up because So consensual, non-consensual is non-consensual role play.
Okay.
Okay, so
the person is pretending to be a victim.
Exactly. Okay. Everybody involved is consenting. They're all consenting adults, but they have structured a role play wherein somebody is pretending to be non-consensual.
Okay. And then again, pedophilia, as you said earlier, people do not, because this was one of my thoughts when you mentioned that people do not control what they're attracted to. People do not control what their kinks are, what their fetishes are, etc. And you said they do control how they act on. Obviously, we don't have kink shaming in our community whatsoever. But again, there's that. Where do you draw the line? Well, you draw the line at where there's no possibility for consent. So you draw the line at children, animals.
Yep.
Any person or thing that cannot consent.
100%.
Now, to go down the line of what you've just said, and we'll only stay on this quite briefly, but it's okay. So if the person that comes in and talks about that, you say that they're going to go off and find their own way. It's like that's the reason I'm bringing this up is that we have our open space where people can talk about whatever trauma, because the thing is, in order to be, this can't talk in graphic detail. It's like they can talk about the generic details of it. So if someone was assaulted by a parent, they could say, I was assaulted by my dad. We just wouldn't describe the assault. And so that's kind of the rule. And the reason for that being is that even that conversation coming up might not be safe for people in chat, but for me to turn around and say to that person, you can't talk about that in here. It's not, that's not safe for that person. And especially this has come up because we have people that are suicidal come into the chat a lot. And sometimes they're trolls. It has been found out that sometimes they're trolls. I always go down the route of, I'm going to treat the person like they're not a troll, even if it's coming across very...
I agree. I agree. I do the same.
And we had how we ended up with our rule is we actually had people the first few times that happened, because I mean, it was bound to happen. I did a stream on World Suicide Prevention Day 2 years ago and actually titled it World Suicide Prevention Day. So we had 5 suicidal people come into the one stream. And we had members of the community at the time talk about like how it was very triggering, how it was very upsetting. And I kind of at the time said, yeah, but imagine if like you walked into a room and it was a support group and in a physical space, and you turned around and said to the person, I'm so suicidal, and someone in the audience stood up and said, oh, that's so triggering, can you not think about the rest of us? It's like it's almost impossible to think about everybody.
100%.
And that's so what I'm thinking, so the kind of how I'm getting to this in a very, I say we'll talk about this for a few seconds and I talk about it for 10 minutes myself. But I suppose what I'm getting to is like where that person who is a paedophile or is maybe not a paedophile because they've not acted upon it and they want to come and talk about those feelings. Do they need is it, I'm not saying your space has to be that, but again, devil's advocate, does that person not need a space where they can talk about it? And is that person being told that their kind of proclivity is worse than anybody else's, or is like more, is that kind of a shaming factor? Is that shame gonna create we meet our destiny on the path we choose to avoid it kind of thing? I know I'm being super careful on the way I'm wording all of this, because, but yeah.
Yes, I would. Okay, yeah, and I understand why you're being so super careful about wording all of this, and I am going to have to be very careful about wording my response. So I get what you're going at, like the if somebody, because I genuinely do believe that people can't control who they are attracted to, or in certain circumstances what they're attracted to. But like I said, they can control what they do about it. I am very, very aware that in this day and age, like pedophilia is very much perceived as the worst of the worst crimes, and I agree. I think it is the worst of the worst crimes.
I agree too.
And there's no shadow or excuse for it or what have you. But I am also very, very much aware that, as I previously mentioned, people can't control what they are attracted to. And if they've got nowhere to go and talk about it, then those feelings get worse. Those because they're not gonna. I mean, how many people within this community, how many people that are listening to this, how many people have had therapy or are in therapy for other things in their life, you know? And we've definitely got a society at the moment where you've got like people on TikTok that are like vigilante pedophile hunters that will go and find people like that, and like people that are hanging around schools and stuff, like, what the fuck are you doing here? And like target them and pull up like text messages that they've sent to other people and stuff. And I agree with the principle of making sure that people aren't a threat to minors. I agree with the principle of making sure that people aren't a threat in general. But I'm very, very aware of the fact that if you make that a super public, super
celebrated thing as well.
Yeah, a celebrated thing. You prevent that person or people like that from ever feeling like they can go and get help.
Yeah.
And I would much rather somebody who has those urges wants to go and get help and be okay to go and get help before they do anything that could potentially harm themselves or anyone around them.
Yeah.
Like, I would much rather somebody turn around and be like, do you know what? I've got some things that are not okay going on in my brain, and some urges and some attractions that are really not all right under any circumstance. I feel okay to talk about this stuff and go and see a professional therapist about how I can manage this and potentially expunge it from my life.
Yeah.
And that's a really important thing. And it's one of those situations where I fully understand the reason why pedophilia is so victimized, because it is abhorrent and it disgusts me in my soul. But from an educational point of view, and from an understanding and open point of view, there needs to be somewhere where, like, if you're going to have urges like that, if you're going to have urges for pedophilia, you're going to have urges for bestiality, you're going to have urges for things that are not consensual, you need to be able to find somewhere that you can talk about those urges and deal with those urges before they become a situation where you can't control them anymore and you do something that is unforgivable.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you worded it very perfectly and carefully. So there was
a moment there. There was a moment of tension where I was like, "Fucking hell! Right? How am I getting around this?"
Later on, I never edit anything out, but like later on, I'm going to be like, "Yeah, do I regret asking that?" I don't know. I think it's important to talk about.
It is important to talk about.
Important doesn't necessarily mean comfortable.
No,
and I am so clammy from having that conversation right now.
Yeah.
But right, do I? Well, to be fair, that was the close end of my final question before asking about kind of your own projects and stuff. But all right. I will go back to something that Raven said earlier if I can find it, because basically when I said about like being open about kinks etc. on stream. Let me see if she's added me in it. I think she did. Not when you're talking about sex or personal kinks, but I mean when you are kinky as a personality outside of sex, like dominant or submissive. So do you had that, or is it okay to be yourself without being dominant or submissive towards others, if that makes sense?
If I'm understanding the question correctly, I don't think there's any shame in turning around and being like, I am the dom in the relationship, or I am a professional dom by any stretch of imagination. Obviously, there are social contexts there that you should probably be aware of in regards to not everyone's going to be okay with it. Not everyone's going to be all right with it. Is that all right? Much like being like a stripper or on OnlyFans, like not everyone's going to be all right with it. Not everyone's going to be okay with it, but that's not your issue. That's theirs. There is that element of it. But in regards to like being dom and submissive, like to other people, remember everything's consent. Yeah. And every, like in a dom sub scenario or a master slave scenario or a top bottom scenario, there's always consent and there's always like understanding beforehand. I've definitely been in fetish clubs before where someone's come up and been like, are you a dom or a sub? And I'm like, what? And they're like, are you a dom or a sub? And I'm like, I'm pretty dom, to be fair. And they're like, oh, well, fuck you then. And I'm like, where the fuck did this come from? Like, what? Or they'll come up to somebody who's submissive and they'll be like, kiss my shoes. And it's like, wait a minute. Just because they're submissive doesn't mean that they're your submissive.
Yeah.
Like, take a fucking moment. All right. And a lot of it does come in, especially with new dominant people, with people that are like, they're dominant in and of themselves, but they've never really expressed it anywhere. They feel they need to go the extra mile and be dominant in every scenario. And it's like, that you don't have to do that. First of all, these people haven't consented to be dominated by you. Second of all, it makes you look like a dickhead. Like there's no middle ground there. Yeah. So yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to, in that regard, consent. Like, it's not just consent for sex. It's not just consent for being felt up. It's also consent for how you behave to other people. Yeah. And especially in a kink and fetish environment.
Cool. I think this will be an easy question to answer, but for which makes a change. It'll be like, rather than 20 sentences, it'll be one word, I think. Do you think disabled adults should be given the chance to enjoy sex, even if it means paying for it?
Yes.
Yeah. 100%.
I am very much pro sex worker.
Yeah, me too.
For starters, it's a job, and if somebody is, I would be very, very careful about turning around and saying, if you are going to be a sex worker yourself, be very aware of what you're getting into, and not only the taboos of sex work itself and the social damnation of it in a lot of scenarios, but also be aware of the emotional attachments that people will have to you, and that you may find that you have to other people, that you might not be prepared for. Like, sex work, it can be a very exhausting, both physically and emotionally, experience. And like, I know a lot of people are like, oh, it's easy money. It's not. It's not, because there is a lot of emotion in there. There's a lot of not only your emotion, but navigating other people's emotions. Like, there's what are parasocial relationships and all kinds of stuff that you're going to be getting into there. So just be careful if you're getting into sex work. But in regards to disabled people, yeah, like, disabled people are people. Yep. And every person has the right to explore and enjoy sexual activity should they want to. We've got to appreciate the asexual people out there that are not interested in sex at all in certain circumstances. And
they should be given the freedom to enjoy not enjoying sex.
Yeah,
without 100%. People being like, you know, like
100%.
Without the comments that are thrown at them. So,
oh yeah, and there are loads of comments. There's a lot of taboo around not having sex. Yeah. Why wouldn't you want to have sex?
Yeah.
Because they don't want to have sex, or they just don't have the sex drive for you as a person, and that's perfectly fine as well. You know.
Yeah. And like, why wouldn't you have sex? Not even with me.
Not even with me.
I don't have a Zoom. I don't have a Zoom on this particular overlay right now, so I can zoom right in on my baby blues that are actually brown. All right, cool. So, as for you personally, what do you have? Kind of like, is there any kind of stuff coming up with your own stream, or is like, I know you work doing some cabaret stuff and some performance stuff as well. Is there anything coming up that you want to talk about, let us know about?
Yeah, I mean, in regards to my stream is always evolving and doing new and interesting things, because I get bored really easily, and I like throwing out all that stuff. So Mondays and Thursdays we chat in the evenings. Tuesdays and Wednesdays we play games that are voted for by the community and recommended by the community. And I also run a podcast called Thirsty Work, which, much like this one, it's a sex education podcast, but it's also recorded live on stream and then rolled out to the world. Season 1 was done a little while ago, and I'm just prepping everything for season 2. So that's going to be coming up before the end of the year, hopefully. I also run a big fetish cabaret nightclub called Ken, stands for Kinky Erotic Nature. It's a big cabaret, the cabaret risque, that turns into a nightclub. It's super welcoming and super open, and a big pandering to my ego. We decorate out the entire thing. That's in Hull, but you can find more information on kinkyeroticnature.com. Other than that, you can find me on pretty much all social media at Valen Vain, apart from YouTube.
Because, we're close. Yeah. Absolutely amazing. Well, One thing now that you mentioned the name of your podcast, something that that was mentioned a lot earlier was to actually. I've got something called the thirstometer on my stream.
Oh, I love it,
and it tells you, because I've got my own little quote, which is thirsty but worthy, because I am an absolute attention whore, like just the biggest, but I think I deserve it. So, and I don't mean it in a vain way. I don't mean it in like an obnoxious way. I mean it in a.
I love vanity, so you know.
I mean it's in your name.
Exactly.
So yeah, and I was told to put it on when you came on, because it's got 3 different settings. It either lands on 100% thirsty, 100% worthy, or perfect balance. But unfortunately, I was given 10 seconds notice, which meant I couldn't put it on the podcast screen. So I'll put it on the just chatting screen when we're finished. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we wrap this up?
Friends, whatever it is that you're doing, do it with consenting adults. Safe, sane, and consensual is the way that we tend to go about things. Make sure that you are educated and understand what you're dabbling into, and do your research. Make sure you're of a sound disposition, even if you're not of a sound mind, because obviously there are a million things that can affect you in the world, but make sure that whenever you're doing it, you're not under the influence of any drugs or drink. Make sure you're doing it of completely level-headedly, and make sure it's all between consenting people. And other than that, enjoy yourself, indulge in the pleasure. Don't be ashamed of your kinks or your fetishes. And if there's something that you do have that you are that revolves around a non-consenting idea, make sure you go and get help. Yeah. Make sure you go and get help. Do yourself and everyone around you a favor for that aspect. As we touched on it, I thought I'd add that to the ensemble. You know,
I like it.
Other than that, look after yourselves and don't be afraid of pleasure. Don't be afraid of pleasure. Pleasure is great.
Pleasure is indeed great. Valen, thank you so much for joining me. This has been.
Thank you for having me.
It followed my prediction. It was both easy and entertaining, apart from that sweaty hand bit. But it was a.
But you're right. It was important. Yeah. That bit was really important. Like, even if it was very tense for a moment there.
I'm sure the community will be requesting you back at some point, and because I've kept my eye on the chat a little bit, and they love you. So
that's good, because I love me too.
I mean, I was going to say half of them are part of your cult, but right. I will catch you soon. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
No problem.